that what we want to talk about here today is early stage funding in Africa. I think interesting topic from my perspective. It can be approached from many angles, and I'm looking forward to learning from each one of you guys. I think at this point, it's good to say that we welcome the participants to what is, I think, can promise to be an exciting conversation. Between 4 ecosystem leaders from across Africa. I think today we have Pauline from Shikuti, Dina from Flat 6 Labs, Ali from Chiral Angels, and Elias from Bridging Angels. Is that correct? Is that where we're all from? Just show a nod so everyone can see the amazing people that we have here today. So this is going to be an exciting conversation. I think to make the best of it, 30 minutes, let's try as much as possible to have a good conversation, to also help the participants understand where things are on the continent. I'm sure we're all excited about the growth and the pace of growth that we've been seeing in the startup ecosystem in the last couple of years, particularly in the early stage space, which I think there's been quite a number of innovative approaches to funding. So what I will do, if you don't mind, is to say for each one of us to take about just 1 or 2 minutes to do a quick introduction of ourselves, the organization we represent, and if possible, what we think of the early stage landscape within the African startup ecosystem. And I'll start, I'll take the lead and start. My name is Bosun Tijani. I'll be moderating this session. I lead the team at CCHub, which is the largest technology innovation hub on the continent, with presence in Lagos, Nigeria, in Nairobi through the High Hub, but also in Kigali as well. We also run what we call the CCHub Syndicate, which is an exciting new way of mobilizing funding from high net worth individuals across Africa, but also Africans in diaspora into early stage startups as well. I'll pass it on to Dina from there.
Thanks, Bo. Looking forward to an exciting conversation. So you've already mentioned I work with Flat 6 Labs. I'm the Chief Investment Officer. We are a seed and early stage investor in emerging markets, accompanied with an accelerator program, which we believe is a fantastic combination to take startups at such an early stage, providing them with both the funding, but also the support that they mostly need at such an early stage. So we really take companies, we take the risk early. We're happy to take that very early risk and grow with the companies. We've started out of Egypt, and now we've expanded to Tunisia in North Africa, but then also Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, Lebanon, and recently Jordan, and that's across the Levant and the MENA region, and hopefully soon in sub-Saharan Africa as well.
That's exciting expansion, Dina. I think we're going to have to talk about that in a bit.
Yes, we'll talk longer.
Can we move on to Pauline?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for this amazing conversation that is already seeming to be exciting. So my name is Pauline Kelber. I'm the founder and managing partner for SheEquity. As the name gives it away, SheEquity basically is an investment early stage fund that is focusing on providing early stage funding for female entrepreneurs on African continent. And the reason we did this is really because we want to close the existing 42 billion gender funding gap. So the way we are doing this, we have built what we call an investment ecosystem that starts with the Sheba SheEquity Business Accelerator, where we onboard women entrepreneurs and de-risk their businesses before we can actually write a early stage check to invest in them. So we are excited to really be a part of this movement that is not just talking about closing the gender funding gap, but actually doing it and leading by actions. Thank you.
Actually doing it and leading by action. Great to hear that Pauline is leading, not just talking. And the question I'd like to ask Pauline is about how much progress we've made with the 42 billion gender gap that exists in funding. But we'll come back to that. Before we go to that, can we go to Ali for a quick introduction?
Thank you, Bosun. It's great to be here with everybody. So my name is Ali Shakani. I am the CEO of the recently launched Cairo Angel Syndicate Fund. It's an angel fund, and we are first-time fund managers. Our origin story, which we can get to later, is that we were an angel network. So this was the sort of evolution, natural evolution that we were looking forward to. It took us 10 years, but we think it's a fantastic time. So while we are based in Egypt, our outlook is very much to the Middle East and Africa, especially Africa, because I think that there hasn't been enough co-investment across the continent. That's a real shame, and we're here to address that with everybody else. We're very excited because when we came to build also our IC, we made sure to bring people on board who will help us to achieve that mission. So Tommy Davis, the president of ABAN, is part of our IC, and we also believe in raising the game when it comes to other important issues like gender and diversity. So Heather Hennion has also joined us on the investment committee, and she brings together not only a geographical coverage, but obviously raising the game for us also from a gender lens perspective. So very exciting times for us.
Thanks, Ali. Thanks, Ali. Now, I think I was coming to you, Ilyas, for your introduction.
Yeah, so thanks and welcome everyone who connects. So my name is Ilyas Bitiwi, and I am the co-founder of the Bridging Angel Network. We are a diaspora angel network that focuses on investing in African startups. We actually position ourselves in what we think is the highest financing gap, which is the pre-seed and tickets that goes from $50,000 to $150,000. That's our sweet spot. Yeah, I mean, we've been active, established we started investing in 2019, but we established ourselves last year. And as Ali mentioned earlier, we invest individually as angel, but now we are also moving to the next step where we are setting up a vehicle, which makes it eventually easier to invest in separate startups. And similarly as well, I have some links with Dina, Flat Six Labs in Tunisia, where we invested in startups that came out of your cohort as well in Tunisia. So glad to be here and discuss challenges and issues in the investment space.
That's interesting that we're beginning to talk about synergies there. You know, I have a very simple question to kick us off with. And the question is access to early stage funding, especially pre-seed, is it still a problem in Africa? Very obvious question. Who's going to take on that? Any taker?
I can take it.
Absolutely, go for it.
I can tell you for sure it's still a problem for women entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all have seen this recent report by Britta Bridge and the World Bank, which basically just confirmed what we all knew, but we didn't really have the numbers or data to prove it. So imagine the last 8 years, only 3% of the funding that went to startup went to women, right? So I know one of the questions you mentioned, Bosun, was that you wanted to know about 42 billion funding gap. This is not moving much. So I think there's a progress that has been made. A lot of money have been invested into startup, but you're still seeing this inequality that is not healthy for our economies. We can't achieve our sustainable development bank goals by really not, moving the capital in the hands of female entrepreneurs. So yes, some progress, but not equally distributed.
So some progress, not equally distributed. I think that's an important, starting point. But I still would like to go to Ali and probably get Ali to speak to, what are you seeing with this progress that we're making? Are we truly making progress? Do we now have significant amounts of money available, especially looking at the different instruments that are being used, both to male and female entrepreneurs, and most importantly, in your own capacity, what do you think we can do more to bridge that gap between who get access to what?
Thanks, Bosun. So from our kind of experience, I think it really varies depending on where in Africa we're talking about. I think clearly some markets are more, or ecosystems are more developed than others. So the gaps are different. So I think if you look at Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, really they are kind of quite established. And I think that they probably have sorted out the sort of value chain better than others. Of course, there's always work to be done. But I think for pre-seed, there is more capital to be deployed than there was 10 years ago in those markets. But I think we're still a bit risk averse. You know, just following on from what Elias was saying on synergies. So I personally co-founded a business which is quite new here, which is in the legal tech space, because I come from the legal background. And when we came to bring it, we were lucky that Flat6 were able to take a risk on us, because it wasn't, you know, one of the more established trends like fintech or e-commerce, which I think have done very well. So I think that there's still work to be done on the pre-seed, but fortunately we have people like Flat6 to support us in the Egyptian market, Tunisian market, and hopefully in more markets very soon. But I think for us as a fund, another gap we've identified, and this is kind of our sweet spot, is the post-seed pre-series A. I feel that there's a lot of really great companies that, you know, it just takes a little bit longer in this side of the world to scale. And they get pressured to either then do premature Series A, which means that they don't get good terms. And I think that's not founder friendly and not correct. And at the same time, the other solution they try to do is maybe to pressure the seed investors to stretch the investment, but there's a limit to that. We've experienced it firsthand. So our angel fund is trying to really dedicate filling that gap. Okay, so that's another gap that we found not only in our market, but in other markets. And I feel that you know, we can really help those startups to push on and have a much more confident Series A and beyond.
So Ali, is it correct that you now have a 10 million fund, $10 million US fund?
No, I wish it was 10 million. I wish it was 10 million. No, so we're 5 million angel fund. Okay. Honestly, yeah, we started off with sort of 3 million, but we've been very happy with the response for our first close. So we are just about to announce first close, just finishing up the paperwork. And then with the balance, we're going to be raising over the next 6 months. So if anybody's interested to join us for that mission, we're here to
and to the point you were making before, Ali, do you see that you know, groups like yourself will then start to compete with larger investors as you start to move away from the, you know, the pre-seed stage to the gap between seed and Series A? Are you seeing the possibility that you'll start to also eat into the market where the larger investors are playing?
That's a really good question. We don't think so. So our thesis is that actually a lot of Series A funds had to invest lower to get the right talent that they identified. And I think, as I said, seed investors had to push up. So there was inefficiency in that way, where both were kind of equally unhappy, right? The Series A investors actually would rather wait, you know, to kind of get more Series A. And I think the seed investors also were stretched to their limit and maybe didn't have enough money then to double down on other things or whatnot. So, so our thesis is we're actually helping both sides of that equation. And we saw that before when it came to like pre-seed and seed. It still exists in many markets. So I'm not trying to say, you know, we should kind of go to sleep easy. We still have a lot of work to do, but that's kind of our thesis, that we're actually helping to bridge that gap. And hopefully that will mean more startups and better funding at better stages.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ali, for that. So I'll go to Dina. You know, Dina, you guys have been expanding quite a bit. Ali gave a shout out there to Flat6 Labs, which I think is exciting. I'd love to hear from your perspective. How does the fact that you're expanding strengthen, one, your ability to obviously be able to access more capital for startups in the regions and the countries that you cover? And two is going back to what Pauline was talking to, which is that gap that exists between who gets what, the gender gap. What are you seeing in the locations where you support startups, and what are some of the new approaches you're taking to also help to bridge that gap as well, Dina?
Super. So I mean, two very interesting questions. In terms of our network, I think us being across the region really helps us in helping our startups. I mean, I always say as Flatix Labs, we have two main stakeholders: the LPs that have invested alongside us and trusted us, but then the other stakeholder is the founders and the companies and the startups that we aim to invest in and support. And I think in a way, our regional expansion is only a reflection of how, I mean, end of the day, as technology investors, technology really cuts across borders, and I think we're seeing this more and more. And in my opinion, I also see that more and more of the funding available has recognized that. Whereas 10 years ago, when we launched, every country thought that you can be a Tunisia fund similar to what we currently have, or an Egypt fund, or a Saudi fund, and so on and so forth. I think the money now, because it's smart, is starting to realize that those definitions have become a lot less clear and a lot more fluid, because you'll have an Egyptian founder that's based out of the UAE but selling in Saudi, and those connections are very key. And I think a lot more going forward, Flatix Labs funding and programs will be cognizant of that, in the sense that our programs will become a lot more regional to address the fact that scalability means that you need to immediately be very much looking at the other markets. Maybe Egypt can be a slightly special case, because Egypt is such a big market that founders don't feel the need or the pressure to expand for at least 3 years before they feel that they need to tackle other markets. But I feel like certainly in the smaller markets, which are the majority of these countries, similar to Tunisia, and even sub-Saharan, with the exception of Nigeria, you have to expand very fast. And so I think what we have tried to build is that initially we were listening to the market because the investor appetite was local. Flatix Labs, by its nature as a seed investor, is an ecosystem builder. Our success is based on ecosystems, and building those connections with and linkages with the universities, the service providers, the angel groups. And so if Ali has given Flatix Labs a shout out, I have to admit, in its early days as Flatix Labs, it was only the Cairo Angels that were sort of accepting our companies afterwards, because we had that valley of death, right? We had companies that would graduate from Flatix Labs, have that seed investment, and then it's a sudden cliff, right? There's no one to carry them that next 18 months until they're ready for a Series A. And if it wasn't for Cairo Angels, for a lot of our companies, they genuinely would have struggled. They were the very first to come in and assume that risk and take that role and fill that gap in the market. And so we genuinely couldn't thank them enough for that support. And they were first movers too, because they were the first angel group to create in Egypt, and they took that initiative. And so they've added a lot to the market. But part of our role was to support them, create a pipeline, to speak to them often, to say, here's our pipeline, please look at it. Similarly, we had to go to the universities and say, let us meet your best of startups and graduates and see how we can invest in them. We had to go to the government and do the lobbying. And so I think we've built a fantastic grounds in terms of creating these linkages and ecosystems and hubs in each of the location. But I think the next wave of investment will have to be regional, now that we've particularly created the networks. If I'm to move on to Pauline's response on the gender gap, Flatix Labs, both in Tunisia, Jordan, and Egypt, actually has a very particular female-driven mandate, because one of our LPs is working on, or is particularly looking at gender, has that gender lens, and particularly female entrepreneurship. Now, as Flatix Labs, as a fund, we don't necessarily claim to have a gender lens, though we're very keen to always support female entrepreneurs. And the truth is, unfortunately, while the statistics, if we take it from the very end, in terms of the number of females that get female founders that get funded versus the number of male founders that get funded, there is that huge imbalance, and I agree, and I think we need to do something about it. In my opinion, I feel like the real issue isn't downstream, it's actually more upstream. It's the number of applications that we receive from female founders, and I think that's what needs to be tackled a lot more. It's the number of females that have the ambition to go start to go start and take that risk and journey, and have that ecosystem and the culture around them that support them to say, that's a risk I'm willing to take, that's a risk that my culture would accept. And then I agree that Pauline, we can then come and say, right, now that we've seen a balance in terms of the number that start, where is the imbalance in terms of funding? And I unfortunately feel like in our ecosystems that still hasn't developed. And so as Flat6 Labs, a lot of the times what we do is that we felt our job was more, and again, because we're such seed investors and we create the ecosystem, we create the pipeline, we do a lot of awareness talks. And so we have done multiple sessions in terms of trying to get successful female entrepreneurs and showcase them to create that inspiration. Create sessions with aspiring female founders to take them through the journey and explain and break it down, because sometimes it could feel like a very daunting experience for a female that has so many other responsibilities to juggle. And then how can we break it down? And we've also created multiple initiatives through our Start Egypt program in Egypt, for example, and similarly in Tunisia as well, in collaboration with multiple institutions that particularly focus on creating the acumen of entrepreneurship within aspiring female founders and entrepreneurs. And so I think we're trying so hard to fix it more upstream and we feel like that would eventually close the gap, hopefully. But I agree, a lot more needs to be done.
That's an exciting. You've made a lot of points, important points, Dina. But just holding up on the point on pipeline for female founders, which I think is an exciting way for us to also start to think about how we actually fix this problem long term. I'd love to hear from Pauline, but before going to Pauline, I'll go to Elias, because Elias, you're talking about bridging angels. And I think one thing that is quite important from what Dina just shared is that angels and pre-seed investors are actually not necessarily just about helping to find capital, but also helping to grow markets and pipeline. The early stages where the appetite for risk is not there for a lot of investors. I think this is where the early stage community is quite powerful, especially in Africa. Elias, I would love to hear from you. What do you think is a major problem at the minute, despite the progress we've seen in funding? Where do you still see the gap in pre-seed and early stage funding, whether it's gender or non-gender? Where do you think the gap is for an opportunity for us to continue to innovate?
Thanks for the question. It's an excellent one. And I think, a lot is need to be done. If we look at the macro level, the volume of investment within the African continent is growing, is picking up. So I think we're going to reach the 3 billion mark at the end of this year. It's the tipping point. It's the highest ever seen on the early stage investment in Africa. But at the same time, relatively to all the areas in the world, Africa is the one absorbing the lesser amount of available capital. So there is cash in the world. And now it's Africa's capacity to actually attract that capital. Now, if we look more on a meso level, so being an angel investor, it's like being in this sort of schizophrenic environment where there are cash, but then we see the number of bankable and very interesting startups at very early stage. Again, at very early stage, we see evolution. It's getting better, and we see better opportunities. But still, the good opportunities attract almost all the money. And then, as an angel investor, even finding our place to be part of the cap table is sometimes challenging, because one startup will attract everyone and we are like, oh, well, what's going on? And then we are sort of paying a premium for that, because the inflation price is getting higher. So the financial gap exists. I think there are still a lot of opportunities out there that need to be looked at. Money needs to come, and I think this is how and why we mobilize either ourselves directly investing as an angel, but also mobilizing our wider network of angels that do not want to take a lead in investment, but we attract them in as followers. So building that trust is important. However, we also, as early stage, as you mentioned, our tickets are between 150 to 200,000 US dollars. We see the value in picking up startups that are coming out of hubs and from Flat 6 Labs and all the ecosystem, because indeed we see the value that these ESOs organization bring to the table, and we are actually investing in more mature founders. But at the same time, there are challenges, and especially on the pricing level. And I want to sort of maybe it's controversial what I'm going to say, but it's a point of view that I would like to put out there, because if we go at a very early ideation and the incubator structures which now have funds structure where they can invest directly, it's the business model is actually good, and we see the value of it. But at the same time, we see a lot of LPs coming into these funds as long-term equity investors, and they put money out there. And we have the angel investor in the middle, and then the institutional investor that also benefit from LPs like development banks, where they have passion capital, etc. And that sometimes distort the market. So we find ourselves picking up startups that are coming out from incubators, but the valuation is already too high, because the valuation at the output of that incubator is already too high, because that money is sort of, I would say, free money, but so we are sort of squeezed in there, because we don't benefit from de-risking instruments, or we don't benefit from matching funds that will lower our risk.
So as we start to wrap up, Elias, the point you were making is an important one. I don't know if you can treat it in 30 seconds before I go to Pauline. But what I wanted to check with you is the fact that when you compare incubators and accelerators in Africa to those in other continents, say in the Americas, for instance, these guys are well funded, right? People fund them to run their programs, right? So, but in Africa, the only source of funding for incubators are this free money that you're talking about. How do we start to plug that gap to be able to get more value for early stage investors? I don't know if you can take that in 30 seconds, but also if you can, I also want to hear your last thoughts as well. What do you want people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, sure. I mean, very shortly, I mean, it is valuable that we de-risk investment in Africa, and the whole value chain benefit from it, and it is indeed the only way to leapfrog this investment. Now, there are sometimes some distortion of market that we need to be to look at and to be careful about. So the distortion of market that is coming linked to that free money needs to be sort of we need to find an equilibrium where everyone in the investment value chain find itself comfortable with the level of risk. So this is how I will summarize it. It is a bit controversial, but I'm working myself on in a development bank. So it's sort of a questioning that I'm putting out there. And indeed, I mean, to your last question, we need more capital that comes into the African continent, and I do put a call out there to encourage people that have sort of assets, investable asset, at least to look at least at the continent as a whole, because there are great opportunities. So
fantastic.
Far,
thank you, Elias. I'm gonna go to Pauline. Pauline, if I can give you 1 minute, I hope we have it. I want you, if possible, to quickly speak to the point that Dina made on pipeline as one of the ways in which we also need to fix the gender issue with funding. Do you agree that pipeline is an issue? Do we have enough fundable female-led startups at the minute? Or is that a strategy for also bridging that gap. And perhaps your parting words for some of the things that you think is important for us to do to also bridge this gap as well. Over to you, Pauline.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Dina. Yes, it's a problem of the pipeline, but also it requires a specific strategies basically to get it done. So, and this is basically what we have seen, because when we launched Share Equity last year in May, so it's kind of a baby, right, during the COVID, time, and we realized, yes, sometimes most of the pitch deck they're flying on your desk are not necessarily representing, female ownership, because we insist on ownership, seeing women on the cap table, right? So despite that, we've been able to identify really good female-led co-owned businesses, but also we realized if we really wanted to tackle the issue, we can't just leave it to a chance. We need to put a strategy in place where actually we're focusing exclusively on, building a pipeline to get more women into the system, de-risk them, so we can actually be able to address some of the issues that Dina mentioned, where, some women might, hesitate to go into some specific sector that are attracting, investors, the one that are trending. But when you speak to them and you put a program together that is really focusing on understanding why this is happening and providing tools to make it happen, then you start seeing how this can change. And I think because we're talking about Africa, we know that women play a key role in society. And part of the reason I really wanted to be an investor is, of course, to be able to generate financial return for my investors, but also to kind of address the key challenges we see on the continent. And so what I have seen, which was a good confirmation, is like all the businesses we invested in, they're all tackling really key issues.
So sorry, Pauline, I think I'm being told the time is up. I actually wanted Ali and Dina to talk to us, probably take 30 seconds each. How do we use more partnership and this sort of, a Pan-African view to increase, cash that is available for founders to continue to create at the very early stage and to also build the pipeline that we're talking about. So I'll pass it on to all of you guys. Please try as much as possible, 30 seconds if possible, each one of you. Dina and Ali.
So I'll jump in quickly. So I think as Fast Labs, we, again, just very quickly, we worked in countries. Now, Sub-Saharan is not one country. It's huge, it's vast, it's very varied, and the cultures are different. And so I don't think this can be done as a one man. To support entrepreneurs across Africa, this is definitely not a one man or woman job. And I think the only way us as organizations that are already there at the seed level can make this happen is by definitely partnering and possibly coming to terms with different people do different things better. And so I can go into Africa and say, I'm not good at bridging the gap of pre-Series A, but we have the support and the activity of the Cairo Angels, and then someone else is able to do the acceleration and the program, and we're providing the seed ticket. And then there are the different service providers across all the region and the hubs and the spots, and not necessarily reinventing the wheel over and again. But ultimately, what I want to say that from Flatix Labs experience, we've realized that though it might be counterintuitive, but concentration helps. Building hubs across Africa that have that ecosystem, that thriving ecosystem, is also necessary. And so I also feel like I think the next step to Africa would be trying collectively to find those hubs and create that attract initially startups from across Africa and maybe East Africa, if this is something that would be more akin to the culture, and then building layers upon that and getting more and more people to interact and create serendipity, and hopefully would be part of that journey as Fast Labs.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Dina. Ali?
Thank you so much. No, look, I mean, just the final thing from my side is that, look, our investment thesis has always been that there's a lot of barriers that don't really exist. They exist in our minds. And we should break those barriers down, whether they're gender, geography, and so on and so forth. Because if we work together and we collaborate together, we can solve any problem. So I think that we love seeing that in our startups. So maybe we should listen to the startups that we support more and do that together more as investors. So we can do it. So let's do it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ali. I know that if we have 1 hour, it's probably not going to be enough for this conversation. It's an important conversation, but the biggest takeaway for me, of course, just listening to all the 4 of you, is the awareness that is a significant role for the early stage investment community to play in strengthening the pipeline for bankable businesses across the continent. But also, most importantly as well, that we have to be intentional for us to be able to bridge that gender gap that exists, that we're not just talking about it, but we actually put our resources behind building the pipeline that can make it a dream that will come true. Thank you all so much for taking our time to join this panel, and to our listeners as well. I do hope that you end up taking something out of this. It's been a pleasure to be on the call with all of you guys. Thank you. Bye.